Hi folks, welcome to week 12 and our second week of David Hume. This week we're getting away from his epistemology and into his philosophy of religion. So these are Hume's aptly named dialogues on religion. They're in a sense much like dialogues both by Plato and Berkeley. You know, philosophers kind of like this whole dialogue thing. There are four characters. We're only really going to hear from three of them. So Pamphilus is the narrator, and so all the times when you see the word I, that's who's talking. He doesn't matter so much. Cleanthes is an empiricist, and he's going to give the teleological argument for the existence of God. So he's looking for sort of evidence in the world. Demea is a second character, a second main character. Demea will defend the cosmological argument, and so look for non-empirical, non-evidential reasons to think that God exists. And then Philo is Hume's mouthpiece, at least scholars tend to agree. And he thinks that they're both wrong, and so Philo presents this big idea that human reason and human faculties are just inadequate to make any assumptions, to make any conclusions about God, either with experiential observation or without it. It's not that there's not a God, it's not that there is a God, we're just not even equipped to know. So they start off with a fairly interesting question, I think. When should we teach people about religion? Now, Demea suggests that we should teach religion only to very mature people. We should sort of do all the education about everything else, and only when people are really mature, developed adults should we teach them religion. And Philo wonders, is this too late? Shouldn't we start teaching them as kids? Well, Demea says, no, we should, make people inclined toward piety early on, but we should really teach the sort of science of religion later on. And we know this because our limits, our human capacities, make doing the sort of really deep questions, the sort of scientific part of religion, very difficult, maybe even dangerous. And so they say, well, let's talk about our limits, and let's figure out what we can know and what we can't. And, well, hey, this sounds a lot like Hume. It also sounds a lot like Locke, if you remember, from earlier in the term. Well, Philo's going to give us some reason to doubt. Philo's going to say we can't really be certain about even very simple things like rocks. And if you remember, we've been reading a bunch of folks in modern philosophy who cast doubts on all sorts of things, right? We can't know that material stuff exists. We can't know that cause and effect exists. We can't be sure that we exist, right? So how could we ever be sure about something complicated like religion if I'm not even sure that a rock that I see right in front of me is actually a rock? If it's actually a physical thing, if it even exists, if I even exist, etc. But Cleanthes responds, well, sure, but it's impossible to live your life that way, thinking, well, I don't know if that's really a rock, right? You've got to be a realistic person. You can't be a skeptic forever. And remember, Hume likes this idea, because he says, even though we can't prove cause and effect exists, we still need to live our life as if there's cause and effect. Cleanthes is going to go on, though, and he's going to say, if we believe fervently enough, we can get rid of all of our doubts entirely. Right? If you believe well enough, if you're really committed to something, you won't even consider the fact that, well, maybe this isn't actually true. But Philo's going to say, well, should we actually do this? He's going to say, well, we do have good reason to worry about daily life, because that's pretty important. So let's look at religion by contrast and see whether we should dig into that with sort of doubt and science as well. Well, we know we have a good reason to carefully investigate things that matter day to day. So I should worry whether my food is actually food, or whether it could be poison or non-existent or anything like that. I do need to eat. This is really important. But Philo's going to say, investigating the afterlife and the origins of everything, so everything that happens after I die and everything that happens way before we were all born, that goes way past what our human capacities let us do. So he says, well, why would we assume that our usual methods of investigation could even work? We have no idea. But, Cleanthes points out, well, we do assume this all the time. Like, think about physics. Do you understand how complex physics works? No, you don't. I can guarantee you don't, because even most physicists don't understand how complex physics works. But you trust it, you apply it, all the time, right? We rely on a theory of gravity that isn't very good, but we still trust it. We need it, in fact. So Cleanthes is going to suggest two different kinds of skepticism. He says, the first is vulgar, where you just sort of, if you don't understand something, you just leave it alone, don't touch it. The second is philosophical, in which you sort of overdose on evidence. You consider each thing very specifically, and this is the kind of skepticism that we've seen from Berkeley, from Locke, and from Hume. He's going to say, well, why not be a philosophical skeptic rather than a vulgar skeptic about religion, and consider it really carefully? That would mean that religion doesn't force us to use less reason, but to use it more. So what will happen when we try this? We're going to do a really close, careful investigation of religion and see what we can find out, and we'll see what happens starting in our next video.